The moment you cease caring what others think of you, everything in your life begins to flow with a power you never imagined possible. This sounds like madness, does it not? We have been taught since the cradle that concern for others' opinions is the very foundation of civilization, that caring what people think makes us human, decent, respectable. But I write from my mountain solitude to tell you this is the most insidious lie ever whispered into the ear of humanity. For decades, I've observed men and women who spend their entire existence arranging their lives like furniture in a room, constantly adjusting everything to please an imagined audience. They speak words they do not believe. They pursue goals they do not desire. They marry partners they do not love. And for what? For the nodding approval of mediocrities who will forget them the moment they die. Meanwhile, the rare individual who learns to move through the world, caring nothing for the bleating of the herd, discovers something extraordinary. Freedom releases energy. What you have been hemorrhaging in anxiety about judgment suddenly flows toward your actual goals. This is not mysticism, it is physiology. The slave exhausts himself performing for masters. The sovereign man commands his own power absolutely. Everything changes when you stop caring. Let me show you how. You carry an invisible parliament inside your skull. Every moment, phantom legislators debate whether your impulses are acceptable. Before you speak your true thought at dinner, they convene. What will the pastor think? What will your brother-in-law say? What will the ladies whisper? You obey their verdict without realizing these judges are fictions, caricatures you constructed from anxiety. I once observed a young scholar in Leipzig rehearsing conversations for hours before approaching his professor. He imagined every possible disapproval, prepared elaborate defenses. When he finally spoke, the professor barely listened. The young man had been enslaved by phantoms of his own creation. Here is what you must see. These imagined critics are harsher than any real person would be. Your mother's voice in your mind delivers crueler judgments than your actual mother ever spoke. This reveals the mechanism's true nature. It is self-torture dressed as prudence. Try this today. Before any decision where you catch yourself thinking, but what will they think? Stop. Name the specific phantom judge. Is it your father? A former teacher? Some vague they? Write down the name, then ask, has this person actually expressed this opinion, or am I inventing their disapproval? You will discover something shocking. Most of your judges exist only in your imagination. The tribunal has no real members, only your anxiety wearing different masks. This recognition breaks the first chain. You have been obeying ghosts. From your earliest memory, you were trained like a dog learns tricks. Your mother praised you when you were agreeable, which meant when you suppressed your authentic self. Your father nodded approval when you showed the right kind of ambition, his kind. Each reward for conformity, each withdrawal of affection when you displeased, forged the chains you now wear. A merchant's daughter in Basel was praised throughout childhood for being pleasant. By 30, she could not express a dinner preference without first gauging everyone's opinion. Her authentic desires had been buried so deeply, she no longer knew they existed. This is how the slavery works. It was installed before you developed capacity to resist. You learned that your value came from external approval as naturally as you learned to walk. The conditioning runs so deep, you mistake it for your own nature. Map your training now. Who taught you to seek approval and how. Mother's praise for being good, father's disappointment when you failed his expectations, teachers rewarding you for regurgitating their stale wisdom. Each created a specific pattern of people-pleasing. Recall one childhood moment when you were authentic and were punished for it. Perhaps you spoke an embarrassing truth or showed enthusiasm for something deemed improper. That memory holds the key to where your self-censorship began. But do not blame your parents. They transmitted conditioning they themselves received. The point is not grievance, but understanding. Your jailers were prisoners too. Seeing how the chains were forged means you can now begin to break them. When someone judges you, what actually occurs? Sound waves strike your ear. Neural impulses travel to your brain. You process words. Then, and here is everything, you choose whether to grant these words power over you. The judgment has no inherent authority. You give it authority. I once knew a gifted composer who showed his early work to a mediocre critic in Leipzig, a man of no talent who made his living pronouncing judgment on his betters. The critic's harsh verdict devastated the young composer. He put away his scores, took a teaching position, and never composed again. Years later, I learned he died, having never written another note of his own music. But understand this clearly. The critic's opinion did not kill that composer's gift. The composer killed it himself by granting the critic's words the power to define his worth. The critic merely pulled a trigger the composer had already placed against his own temple. Here is the distinction that changes everything. Masters create values from their own power. They say, "This is good because I value it." Slaves can only react to values created by others. They say, "This is good because the masters say so." When you care what others think, you occupy the slave position, even if you possess a master's soul. You accept values created by others rather than creating your own. Practice this. When criticism comes, ask 3 questions. Does this person know more than I do about this matter? Do they have achievements warranting my respect? Are they speaking from concern or from envy? If your answers reveal an unworthy judge, dismiss their judgment accordingly. Liberation requires daily acts of deliberate defiance. You cannot drift into freedom. You must seize it repeatedly until it becomes your nature. Begin each morning with this declaration, spoken aloud if you dare. Today, I shall speak my truth and choose my course regardless of others' judgment. This sets your intention before the day's conditioning takes hold. Then seek 3 opportunities to speak your genuine thought, even when you know it will meet disapproval. Start small. Express an unpopular preference at dinner. State a disagreement clearly without defensive hedging. Each act of authentic speech builds your liberation muscle. When I resigned my professorship at Basel, colleagues warned I was being reckless, throwing away security. Each night I would review their disapproving comments, examine them for useful information, then consciously dismiss the disapproval itself. Within weeks, their opinions ceased to penetrate my fortress. Notice what happens in your body when you speak authentic truth. Your heart races, your stomach tightens. This is decades of conditioning screaming at you to conform. Speak anyway, then observe. The disapproval you feared is usually less severe than imagined, and even when harsh, it cannot actually harm you. Each evening, audit your day's choices. Where did you choose authenticity over approval? Where did you backslide into people-pleasing? This observation creates a gap between stimulus and response, the first taste of genuine freedom. Do not confuse authentic speech with needless offense. You are learning to express your genuine thoughts, not to be deliberately provocative. Authenticity is not aggression. Freedom is not rudeness, but neither is it the timid silence you have practiced all your life. The true test arrives when living authentically demands actual sacrifice. When your brother-in-law stops speaking to you, when colleagues exclude you from their gatherings, when comfortable relationships end because you refuse to play the assigned role. Most who begin this path turn back here. They taste freedom, then retreat when it carries a price. I knew a businessman in Basel who left his secure position to start an independent venture. His relatives stopped inviting him to family gatherings. Former colleagues called him reckless behind his back. His comfortable social position evaporated. Yet when I asked him about these losses, he said they felt more like shedding ill-fitting clothing than losing something precious. Before making choices that risk disapproval, become clear about what you gain versus what you lose. Often you will discover you are risking relationships based on your performance, not your actual self. Such relationships were never genuine. They were transactions where you traded authenticity for acceptance. Not all relationships are worth preserving at the cost of your freedom. Learn to distinguish between people who love the real you, rare and precious, versus those who love the performing you, common and worthless. Liberation often brings temporary solitude before new companions appear. This loneliness is not permanent. It is the space between shedding false connections and attracting true ones. The mediocrities who required your performance fall away. In time, you will find others who recognize and value your sovereignty. When facing a choice between authenticity and preserving a relationship, ask yourself, does this person want me to be myself? Or do they want me to continue performing a role? If the latter, ending this relationship frees both parties. You stop exhausting yourself. They can find someone who genuinely wants to play their game. A man who has achieved liberation from others' opinions moves through society fundamentally differently than the enslaved. His energy flows toward his goals rather than hemorrhaging in anxiety about judgment. The enslaved man wakes already anxious. He dresses with one eye on the mirror, one on his imagination of others' judgment. At his office, he maintains a careful facade, laughing at stupid jokes, nodding during foolish conversations. He returns home to review the day's social performance, worrying whether he offended someone. He goes to bed exhausted, not from genuine labor, but from constant performance of acceptability. Contrast this with the liberated man. He wakes refreshed because he has nothing to defend. He dresses to please himself. He speaks his genuine thoughts at work and discovers that honest speech, even when it provokes disagreement, commands more respect than timid agreement. When unjustly criticized, he shrugs and continues his work. The criticism dissolves like morning mist before the sun of his indifference. I observed two painters in Nice. One constantly sought gallery approval, producing tepid work designed to please current taste. Another painted what his vision demanded, caring nothing for whether critics praised or condemned. 40 years later, one is forgotten. The other's work hangs in collections throughout Europe. This principle applies everywhere. Authenticity outlives approval. seeking always. Practice this in your next meeting. Speak only from genuine conviction. If you have no real opinion, say, I have not thought deeply about this, rather than parroting acceptable views. If you disagree with consensus, state your disagreement clearly without defensive hedging. Notice how the quality of conversation improves when even one person speaks authentically. When you no longer need others' approval, every domain of life transforms. Relationships cease being transactions, you performing for validation, and become genuine encounters between sovereign beings. I knew a professor in Leipzig who required constant reassurance from his wife. Do you still love me? Am I good enough? She grew exhausted by his need. His love was not love, but vampirism, using her to fill his emptiness. Contrast this with relationships where both possess inner certainty about their worth. Their love is generous, playful, free, because neither uses the other for validation. They can afford genuine intimacy because they are not defending fragile egos. Criticism can be heard without experiencing it as attack. Flaws can be admitted without fearing abandonment. The same transformation occurs in work. When you pursue excellence for its own sake rather than for applause, you discover intrinsic motivation's superior power. You are no longer performing for an audience, but creating from authentic vision. Even failure changes its nature. The approval seeker experiences failure as existential catastrophe. Loss of others' approval means loss of his only source of value. The free man experiences failure as information. This approach did not work. I shall try another. This transforms his relationship to risk and makes bold action possible. Practice this in your closest relationship. For 1 week, abstain from seeking validation. Do not ask, was that good, or do you approve, or are you happy with me? Simply be present and genuine. Notice how the relationship deepens when you stop treating the other person as a validation machine. At work, choose one project to pursue for its own sake, regardless of whether it will win praise. Discover what you are capable of when freed from the burden of performance. The old gods are dead. I have proclaimed this death myself. Yet men still seek idols. In Christianity's absence, they worship public opinion and social approval. These new gods are more tyrannical than the old. At least the Christian God was imagined wise and loving. The God of public opinion is stupid and cruel, demanding constant sacrifice while giving nothing but anxiety. Liberation from others' judgment creates a crisis. If you reject their values, by what standard do you live? Many discover they have no answer. They have performed so long they have forgotten their true identity. Freedom from others' opinions is not enough. You must become a creator of values rather than merely a rejecter of others' values. This is harder work by far. In the boarding houses of Italy, I have watched men who lost their Christian faith become slaves to public opinion. They simply exchange one master for another. But occasionally, I encounter a rare soul who has learned to create values from his own power. These are humanity's true nobility, regardless of birth. Ask yourself 3 questions in solitude. What do I genuinely value when stripped of all conditioning? What kind of person do I wish to become? What standards shall I hold myself to? Standards more rigorous than any external authority would impose? Write your answers. This becomes your self-created law, your personal philosophy. Revisit it quarterly as your understanding deepens. Do not confuse this with selfish relativism. Whatever I want is good. No. The man who creates his own values holds himself to standards far more demanding than society requires. Self-legislation means becoming your own strictest judge, not eliminating all standards. You are not seeking comfort. You are seeking truth. Scattered throughout Europe exists a secret aristocracy, not of birth or wealth, but of spirit. These are individuals who have broken their chains and live by self-created laws. When you liberate yourself, you join their ranks. During my wanderings between Sils Maria and Turin, I occasionally encountered such individuals. They moved through the world unburdened by others' opinions, speaking truths that made the comfortable uncomfortable. We recognized each other instantly, like eagles spotting fellow eagles above valleys where sheep graze. These encounters sustained me through years of isolation. Free spirits recognize each other through subtle signals, willingness to speak unpopular truth, comfort with solitude, immunity to social pressure, focus on self-created standards rather than external validation. They are rare, perhaps 1 in 100, but they exist. As you move through the world in your newfound freedom, begin noticing others who possess similar sovereignty. Cultivate these relationships carefully. They will sustain you when the herd attacks, and the herd will attack, for your visible freedom threatens their system of mutual surveillance. Understand this: your personal liberation is part of something larger. You stand at a crossroads of human possibility. One path leads toward what I call the last man, seeking only comfort and approval, making everything small and safe, saying, "We have discovered happiness," while blinking contentedly. This is humanity domesticated, neutered, reduced to sheep. The other path leads toward the Übermensch, not a superhuman fantasy, but simply the human who's overcome the human, all too human need for external validation. The one who creates values rather than accepts them, who affirms life rather than denies it, who commands rather than obeys. You've climbed to heights where few can breathe. The choice remains. Will you die having performed your life for mediocrities, or will you live your truth regardless of judgment? Choose consciously.